Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So it is Thursday. We are Thursday the 11th. We are
Let me say it's nice to be in. This is really apropos of nothing, but I like being in this civil, the kind of civil conversations that we have here at the DMZ. For some reason, it just feels so comfortable.
It's like a warm bath.
Having these talks. That's why people listen to this.
Just, get yourself
in the dozens.
Get yourself a cup of hot cocoa on a brisk fall day.
Maybe take a bubble bath while you listen.
That's right. Make a night of it. So while it's pleasant being in this comfy spot,
yes,
it's getting more raucous out in the heartland. We are less than 1 month from the midterms. We're coming off of the contentious Kavanaugh confirmation, and no one can comfortably predict if the House or the Senate is gonna change hands. And so you're seeing, I think, intensified rhetoric on both sides of the aisle. You have Trump calling the left a left-wing mob. You have Eric Holder saying, when Republicans go low, we kick them.
Right.
So are we going to, how over the top is this going to get between now and Election Day?
Have you seen the movie Idiocracy?
That I have. This feels different than that. I mean, they were
Didn't Michael Avenatti just challenge Donald Trump to like an MMA fight for the presidency of America? I think there was something. I saw something about that.
Trump
on Twitter.
Jr. That was Trump Jr.
Was it Trump Jr.?
Yeah.
Okay.
But Idiocracy was the country becoming so stupid that everyone was sort of dulled into compliance.
No, but the guy that they elect president.
Well, they elect the wrestler as president.
Yeah, they elect a wrestler president. Yeah, and by the way, let me say the original title, I forget, but the original title of Too Dumb to Fail was going to be something about Idiocracy. Mm-hmm. There was something that was actually one of our original launching, sort of ideas for Too Dumb to Fail. And ended up getting. I don't even know if I referenced the movie in the book at all. It might have all gotten cut out. I don't know if you remember that version, Bill. You might have seen an early version that had that in there. But anyway, no, we're sort of out competing to see who's the toughest, who's the strongest. I hope it's funny. I mean, it could also be very scary, right? It wasn't that long ago. And again, I will totally concede your point that both sides are guilty of ratcheting up the rhetoric. But just to illustrate the danger of this, a year ago, like I could throw a baseball and hit from my house and hit the baseball field where Steve Scalise was shot, a Republican congressman, by a Bernie Sanders supporter. Obviously a guy who was unhinged, but sometimes unhinged people are provoked by extreme rhetoric. Last week, this thing went viral. There was some young pro-life girl who was kicked by a liberal dude.
In Canada. In Canada.
Okay. All right.
Let's not blame good old fashioned American leftists here.
Yeah,
those Canadian punks were doing that.
Yes, well, these Canadians have been unhinged.
They're known for being violent, as you know.
They've been unhinged for years, and I'm very worried about Canada. But maybe that's the point, right? If Canada's getting this crazy, I guess my point is that rhetoric could have consequences. I think it's unfortunate. But the Democrats seem to have chosen to go this way, right? Hillary Clinton just the other day with Christiane Amanpour in an interview said something like, well, we can't be civil. We're not going to be civil. We can once Democrats win everything, then we can be civil again. I'm seeing these stories where people keep saying, if you see a Republican politician in public, at a public place, don't give them comfort. Don't let them be in public. Shame them. Go up and confront them. That's a horrible idea. It's a horrible idea. Do you want these people to be more cloistered? Do you want them to interact with the public less? And never mind the fact that you're invading a private space. And I call it mob behavior personally. By definition, I think it is. A lot of people dispute that. Anyway, I wish the Democratic Party had become, we're going to be the opposite of Trump. You know, we're going to be civil. We're going to be about ideas. But they're doing the exact same thing that I told Republicans not to do. And so I would say it's very consistent of me to criticize them now, because they're replicating exactly the horrible stuff Republicans did a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you've never been one to encourage this kind of stuff on the right, but I do think we should be careful not to conflate, because I think they're I think when Eric Holder says when they go low we should kick them, I'm not saying that's not something that I would say. I don't like this. Let's twist what Michelle Obama said and basically say Michelle Obama was right. I mean, Holder even prefaced it saying, like, I am friends with Michelle Obama. And, I mean, the Holders and the Obamas are very close people, very close to each other. So he wasn't trying to do this in a mean way. But there are the folks on the left, there are folks on the left who think we can't be too nice. I don't think Holder wasn't making the argument we need to confront them in their private spaces. He was speaking more metaphorically.
Right. No, I'll grant that. I'll allow that. No, I think you're right. Bill. But I think it's part of a trend of martial, angry, violent rhetoric, and that has consequences. I mean, I actually tell my kids, I use that line. I steal the line from Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. I use that to teach them about life and about how to behave, like at school and stuff. And because that's a great line, and he is basically saying no. When they go low, we kick them. Well, kicking is, that's like, I mean, in politics is full of like martial rhetoric, but like, I remember Sarah Palin with the whole scope or whatever target. Let's target Democrats for.
And there are plenty of people on the left then that felt she was, if not intentionally, at minimum unintentionally, encouraging people who might be unhinged to actually commit violence. This is, I believe, this was after Gabby Giffords was shot. So it was not a ludicrous thing to talk about, because someone actually did get shot who was in Congress. And
well, I thought it was. Let me just jump in real quick. I thought it was horrible that people were like literally blaming Sarah Palin and saying that she was to blame. I thought that was wrong and ludicrous. But I do think that we could have a discussion about language and rhetoric, and like when Donald Trump. Do you remember when Donald Trump tweeted out, or he actually retweeted a video where somebody had taken some wrestler with a CNN logo over his face?
Yeah.
Getting like body some. I mean, I was very critical of that, because you were basically creating a permission structure for people to go after journalists.
Well, beyond the gift, I mean, Trump at rallies said, "Hey, if you physically assault someone who's a protester at my rallies, I'll cover your legal costs." I mean, he wasn't subtle about it. But when the Sarah Palin thing happened, plenty of people on the right took massive umbrage. How dare the left? Why are we so politically correct? Why do we have to take every, metaphor and treat it as if it is a call to violence? And now you have Donald Trump at a rally saying the left-wing mob is coming to get you. So when Holder says something like, we kick them, which I don't think he means literally, Hillary Clinton, look, the Clintons have never been genteel when it comes to politics. This is not a shift for Hillary Clinton. They've always played rough. I think when in the bounds of legality, of course, they've always been rhetorically rough when facing off with Republicans. That's not new for her. But when people say things like that, talking about being politically tough, and then you have a very, very small group of Democratic socialists, and they are literally DSA members, who confront Ted Cruz in a private restaurant and chant and say shame, shame, and run him out of the restaurant. I don't think that Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder are encouraging that behavior. But when that behavior occurs and it is filmed and is put on YouTube, I mean, probably by the DSA members themselves, because, mind you, there is a strain of thought in, protest theology, if you will, and this comes out of Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, creating discomfort in the private spaces of people in power is what you need to do to affect change. Now, the Alinsky model, to be really specific about it, is you find the individual who is denying you what you want, and you freeze the target. You focus on that one person, and you make that person's life difficult. Not physically hurting, but uncomfortable, to show how serious you are about your issue. And that way you force that person to realize, hey, I can't, this status quo is not tenable. I need to make a change. Going after random people, I mean, Ted Cruz might be a terrible person politically, but he's not literally the single person who is stopping you from getting single-payer health care or universal child care or saving immigrant children who have been separated from their families. Cruz isn't that person. He may be someone who is abetting the person who is doing it. But making his individual life uncomfortable is not really following the Alinsky strategy. And I think that's an example of people sort of taking, what might be seen as, unsportsmanlike on the part of Alinsky, but Alinsky actually has a good track record of actually affecting change, whereas people just doing it kind of half-cocked. You're just giving ammunition to Trump to say, look, there's the mob. There's the left-wing mob. Even though it's 10 Democratic socialists, and now it's getting linked to Hillary Clinton and Eric Holder. Right,
but there were also the pictures of I'll use the word protesters because it seems to be more politically correct today. Basically storming the Supreme Court stairs and pounding on the doors and scratching at the doors of the Supreme Court. I don't think Trump had to call this a mob. I think the American public saw all this, and I think that there's been a big backlash. I think that the whole Kavanaugh, this is part of the Kavanaugh story, of course. This is at least related to the Kavanaugh story, because the left, I believe, is overreacting to Kavanaugh's confirmation. But the backlash against the left, against what I call, I know this doesn't represent you necessarily, but what I call the mob, is actually helping Republicans right now. I don't think Trump had to say it. I think that there was already a backlash. I mean, part of it's reflected at the level of people like me. I mean, Bill, we do this every week, so we could pull the tape. We could probably go back and see me being like, what do I care about Brett Kavanaugh? He is some Georgetown prep, rich kid. Like, he's John. I think I called him Johnny Lawrence from The Karate Kid at one point. Like, why do I have any skin in the game for this guy? Smash cut to me, yelling on TV about a mob. This has basically had the effect of pushing people who are never Trump conservatives who don't like Trump, don't like Ted Cruz for that matter, pushing them to basically see the left is insane. These people are horrible and crazy. What that could be me. Maybe they're going to circle me and my wife someday and start running us out of a restaurant.
But I think that there's a big difference between going to a senator who's eating in a restaurant and running him out of a restaurant than having a protest at the Supreme Court, which is a public space. It's not doing anything to make any individual Supreme Court justice's life uncomfortable. They're outside. No one's threatening someone's life. No one's threatening violence.
It's a little scary when people are banging on that wall and scratching at that door. Well, that seems like a violent thing.
That is not violent. It's dramatic. It's meant to be a bit of a spectacle, but it's not violent. It's not putting anyone's life in danger.
No, I think it was more theater, but it's theater. The symbolism of running up and pounding on a door suggests that you want to break that door down. Well, and then what?
That is the symbolism they are trying to communicate. They're saying what has happened here, not violent. They're trying to say what has happened here is an abomination, and we want to rally the public to fix it, to change it.
What happens if they open the, like, let's say they knock the door down, then what happens?
It's the Supreme Court. It's not some rickety, outhouse shed. Obviously, they're not going to literally tear down the building.
I'm just saying we are. It's one thing to have a sit-in. It's another thing to have signs and placards. But like when you're storming upstairs, banging on, like, aren't we like edging closer to bad stuff?
I think that's well within bounds of public. That's not even civil disobedience. That's not. There's no law breaking there.
I want to do a thought experiment, and I believe that, because Bill, I criticized. Trump all the time. I believe that if a right-wing group started harassing Democratic politicians in public, like if James O'Keefe puts together, an evil, like a group of evil right-wing villains, and they start confronting, Democratic politicians at restaurants and running them out, I would like to believe that I would call that a mob and that I would condemn it. I'd probably write columns at the Beast saying it's horrible. I'd probably go on CNN and talk about how bad it is. And I think everybody would agree with me. I don't think it'd be controversial. I think everyone would be like, "You're right, Matt, and way to go calling out your own side."
Well,
what do you think?
Well, let's go. I don't want to get too smack with the word mob. I mean, mob can mean a group of people chanting. I mean, that can be a mob.
There you go.
You can use mob in a way that suggests on the precipice of violence or moving, on a freight train path to violence. But you can use the word mob in a non-violent context.
Yeah.
So
to me, I mean, I agree, and I think that to me, a mob is a crowd that gets stirred up by passions and isn't necessarily reacting rationally or logically, and are like in the case of the Fiola incident, they were acting sort of defying norms and acting against the law. I mean, I don't think, like, I'm all for free speech, but I don't think you can go into a private restaurant and just decide to protest inside there.
Well, no. Well, in fact, I believe the restaurant called the police. I mean,
to me, that's mob-like behavior.
I mean, that is to be the most charitable civil disobedience. You are choosing to break a law in order to make a point. To make you're purposely trying to make someone in power uncomfortable to make your point. And there are examples when that is an effective tactic. I'm not saying this was an effective tactic, but there are examples in history. A sit-in during the Civil Rights Movement was an effective tactic. They were doing it knowing they might get arrested. And Martin Luther King sat in jail, and he didn't say I broke this law and I shouldn't sit in jail. He's saying I am breaking this law to call attention to a horrible law and to get you angry that I am sitting in jail, and so you will then side with me. So if what happened with Ted Cruz doesn't achieve the goal you're desiring, if it doesn't successfully win the country to your side, then it's not a very good tactic, even if you might argue that it is justifiable in the grander scheme of things.
So do you think, it sounds like you believe that liberals and Democrats have every right to be outraged, but that their tactics are not that they're maybe misguided in their tactics.
Well, I don't think going after sitters in restaurants makes a lot of sense. I mean, there was this brief moment when those two women confronted Jeff Flake in the elevator. Clearly made him very uncomfortable. I think it certainly appears to be something that prompted him to recalibrate slightly. He had just announced he was going to vote yes on Kavanaugh. Then he said, I'm only going to do it so we have a weak FBI investigation. I mean, I think it genuinely affected him. At the end of the day, did it make him a no vote? No. And that's sort of that's the best example of making a person in power uncomfortable in this whole spectacle. It didn't actually change his vote at the end of the day. So
actually, that was one of the reasons I was displeased with Jeff Flake is I feel like he actually incentivized this behavior.
So it clearly is not working to make a Republican not support Trump. Now, is it going to work to get the Democratic base energized to win elections in a month? That we can't say yet. We do know that both sides are playing that game. Both sides are trying to get their bases energized.
Okay.
I just want to close out one point. You have a lot of Democratic candidates who are not playing a base-only game, particularly Democrats who are running in redder areas. They're trying to sell themselves as bipartisan, as problem solvers, as reaching across the aisle. They're trying to have a narrow set of issues they focus on. They're not even mentioning Trump all that much. So I don't know to what extent. I mean, anytime you're a politician running on oppositional turf, it's always a balancing act between getting your base to show up while appealing to the swing. You do want that base to show up, but typically in those areas, if you're a Democrat in a red district or red state, you tend to know that. I know Democratic politicians have to lean right to win. I know who my neighbors are. I know what they have to do. I'm going to cut them a lot more slack than, say, someone in New York or LA is going to cut them slack looking from afar. So my sense is Phil Bredesen doesn't want to see images of Ted Cruz being confronted in a restaurant showing up in attack ads in Tennessee and yoking him to that. I'm not sure that's happened yet, but I wouldn't be surprised because that's the kind of thing that happens. So I don't think this is uniformly what all Democrats want, but we're going to see if this kind of behavior does successfully get that base energized in a way that actually helps them in both blue areas and red areas.
Well, all I was going to say is if the Kavanaugh fight and the protests have the result of ginning up excitement and energy on both sides, that is a net positive for Republicans. Because Democrats already have energy. They already have excitement. I don't see, what is Trump going to do or what could possibly happen that would make Democrats more angry at Donald Trump and more chomping at the bit to go and vote against Republicans. So, in my opinion, any of this controversy and excitement that, if it motivates both sides, that's good for Republicans.
Well, especially on the Senate side, because the Senate map is much more conservative, much more red than the House races, which are still fairly red. I mean, Democrats are still trying to win on red turf, but Heidi Heitkamp, I think she did this with eyes wide open. She was already losing in what polling we have seen, but she's definitely made her job harder coming down against Kavanaugh and giving Kramer something to attack her on, because that is a very conservative pro-Trump state. So to the extent that both bases are energized in a Senate race in North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri, Montana, maybe to a lesser extent Florida, Tennessee, Texas, Arizona, that kind of strategy. I mean, it's not the strategy I would adopt, and I don't think it's a strategy that the candidates there want to adopt, because they've all been running for the most part on highly bipartisan, independent kind of messaging. I mean, John Tester has ads saying, "Look at all the bills I've sponsored that Trump has signed into law." He's not running an anti-Trump race. So Trump's now Trump this whole time in the past few months, Trump has tried to get the base energized. Oh, they're going to impeach me. Oh, we're going to crack down immigrants. Oh, I might shut down the government over the border wall, which he didn't do, by the way. We already passed that deadline. So I do think that Kavanaugh being the first thing that Trump's been able to use successfully to gin up the Republican base Remains to be seen whether that is a sustainable thing for the Republican base all the way through to November. Democrats have been energized because they've been angry at Trump since day one. They don't need a fresh issue to get energized. They will stay energized. I suspect Trump would want to do more things, and I imagine they probably have a schedule sketched out. Here are all the things we're going to do over the last 4 weeks to get Republicans ginned up. That's why the Nikki Haley thing surprised me so much. Why is Nikki Haley resigning? Why is she announcing a resignation before the election, stepping on the momentum that Trump had with Kavanaugh, when she's not even leaving right away? She's leaving, after the election. Usually you get a handful of resignations at the 2-year mark. It wouldn't be weird at all for her to step down in November or December, regardless of the election results. So that was sort of odd, but maybe it's, and you and I don't know what the actual backstory is there. But I imagine that aside, Trump's going to try to do more things to keep that Republican energy elevated.
Yeah, no, look, they got a month, right? That's a long time. And you're right. I think Democrats are going to stay motivated no matter what. And the question is, can this energy last for a month, But it seems like if Eric Holder and Hillary Clinton keep saying stuff that they're saying, and the protesters continue, they may do the work for them, the Republicans.
And in Holder's case, I think Holder is making a 2020 argument for himself. I think Holder is running. I think everybody who's being speculated they might be running is going to run. And Holder is somebody who a lot of the populist left does not like because he did not prosecute Wall Streeters. There are people that like Holder because he stood up to Republicans over Fast and Furious, and he helped Obama with sentencing reform. But people who are very focused on Wall Street do not like Holder at all. And so he made, in his own wording, a deliberate break with his close friend Michelle Obama on this point to signal, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to fight hard.
I think very, very clearly there must be polling and just a sense that Democrats want a fighter. And guess what? Republicans did too. I think that's one of the main reasons, or many reasons, but one of the main reasons Trump won the nomination is that he fights.
Well,
He fights.
Fighting in itself isn't bad. Obama was a fighter.
Right,
Clinton was a fighter. They fought
and prioritized it.
Right, they fought smart. Yeah. They managed to throw the elbow where they had to throw it while maintaining an above the fray, unifying, overarching message. And if you're too brazen about it, it's hard to walk that line. But in the primary, there's definitely an appetite in some quarters for a brash fighter, and Holder is trying to signal I can be that guy. Now, I think you're also going to have people like Joe Biden who are not saying that. Who are saying let's get back to the old days where we all had a brandy after we fought like cats and dogs on the Senate floor. And I don't think that's an insignificant constituency. I have anecdotal conversations with people who love the Avenatti argument, which Holder was essentially appropriating. Avenatti said, when they go low, we hit harder, and Holder said, we kicked them. They're basically saying the same thing. There's definitely people like that. But I know people who were on the Bernie side of the equation who are unnerved at the degrading of our governing norms and do want to get back to a place of comedy. So I don't think the Biden argument is going to fall on deaf ears either. I think that's going to be an argument in 2020, which is going to start, on November 8th of this year. And Holder is just, starting that conversation.
Well, I think there's no doubt who's going to win out. And what's going to win out. The fighting is going to win out, and I think it's going to be very ugly. And, whoever the Dems nominate either needs to be really tough enough to stand up to Trump, or they need to find a way to deal with Trump, right? So I think someone like a Beto O'Rourke could do it by sort of out-cooling Trump the way that Obama might do it.
I mean, Beto is not someone. Was it Beto? I'm sorry. He's not encouraging people to.
I've been told that it's Beto.
Right. So Beto is not someone saying, "I want you to go attack Ted Cruz in a restaurant." He does not do that at all. He has an ad saying how Republicans, Independents, Democrats should get united under his banner. I mean, he's being very liberal in his policy positions, but he's trying to overlay that with a sense of unity and bipartisanship.
I'm just thinking about the matchup, right? I mean, Rubio wasn't able to sort of out-young or out-cool Trump at all. I think Obama versus Trump, this is like the sort of like, would like Muhammad Ali have beaten Mike Tyson? You're trying to sort of match people, but like, it'd be interesting to see like if Obama had gone up against Trump on a debate stage in a campaign, how he would have fared. It's going to be hard to if you're going to try to like out tough Trump and out sort of hardball, out dirty Trump. Number one, it's going to be hard. What's the old thing about fighting with a pig in the mud? The pig, you get muddy and the pig likes it. Like it's going to be tough. I don't know if you can really go lower than Trump. Like maybe Avenatti can, but it's going to be tough. And then you will motivate. You'll basically polarize the entire country, where there's really nobody in the center calling for civility. Where like both sides have to pick their strong man. I mean, that may be what we're headed toward. It's a very primal way of picking a leader. It's like, let's find the strongest, tallest guy and make him our chief, the chief of our tribe. That's not a civilized way of picking a leader, but maybe that's where we're headed.
I want to shift gears, as I often want to do, talk about myself, for what I know you have to run soon.
Another more shameless self-promotion from Bill Scher.
So I have a piece in Politico this
Not
week.
Bill Scher show.
So I have a piece in Politico this week, which was arguing that in the aftermath of the Kavanaugh episode, that so that battle was lost, that seat is lost, but there still is an enormous need to fight the scourge of sexual assaults. And the Kavanaugh case is a reminder that there is a very proven link between excessive alcohol use and sexual assault. That does not mean that alcohol is the root cause of sexual assault. And some people have criticized my piece, kept telling me that you can, a rapist who is not drunk still rapes, and that is true. If misogyny is the root cause, which I said in the article itself, so it's not as if combating alcohol use solves. It's not a panacea. But when you have approximately half of all sexual assaults involving alcohol, and more likely have the perpetrators using alcohol than the victim, it's hard to argue that if we reduce that significantly, that wouldn't have any effect at all. So,
don't you think most sex happens with alcohol too? Like not sexual assault, just sex. Isn't there a strong correlation between drinking and sex?
Yeah, I'm not going to make a knee-jerk assessment on that. I don't know what the research is.
I don't know how we could find out.
I know there is research. There's significant research that shows that somebody is using alcohol in approximately half the cases. There's a range in some of these studies, but approximately half involve alcohol use. Because misogynistic norms amongst men, and particularly white men, is a issue here. There is a argument that you need to have bystanders intervene to essentially not be part of a permission structure for sexual assault, but to say, look, this is a team effort here. We need to be able to step in, and so if they see something happening that doesn't look right, they need to get involved and break it up. that is harder at a party situation where everybody's drunk. Because even your bystanders who might not be rapists, if they're drunk too, they might not be as likely to intervene. Binge drinking on college campuses, binge drinking amongst 18 to 24-year-olds in general runs about 40%. But on college campuses, you have college administrators who are essentially not accountable for patrolling alcohol use on their campuses, and they would say, well, how can you can't put it on me when some party happens? That's impossible for us to patrol. But we have laws saying if you're a parent and there's underage drinking in your house and someone gets hurt, you are criminally responsible. I don't know exactly how a law would be structured that would be fair and appropriate for college campuses. But I think it's an issue to be explored. I don't think it's proper to say, well, kids will be kids. What are you going to do? That there's some serious health risks going on here, and it would be worth having an organized movement, a modern temperance movement, to deal with it.
Well, and prohibition was largely pushed by women who were sick of their husbands going out to the bar, blowing the entire week's paycheck, and then coming home being abusive. I mean, I know there's the whole bootleggers and Baptist, coalition that was part of that, but I think women were pretty much the driving force of the prohibition to begin with for possibly some of the same reasons, actually. Well, but it was with their own husbands.
Right. But not just that. The 19th century women's temperance movement was a huge catalyst for women's suffrage. So at that time, suffrage was a very radical position. It wasn't widely embraced. Temperance had a lot more political support. And it was Frances Willard, as the head of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, that brought the two issues together under the banner of home protection. So suffrage is not some radical idea that's going to upend our households. Women need this to protect their households and have the power to ban alcohol. Now, I'm not arguing for prohibition. I mean, prohibition, I think, was a proven policy failure. And there's other aspects of the temperance movement which are not great. There's plenty of nativism and bigotry in the temperance movement and so forth. But it was a very effective lobby. They built a very broad coalition to literally get a constitutional amendment to ban alcohol use. As a political achievement of itself, that's amazing. I wrote a piece about a year ago, Bill, saying how the MeToo movement and social conservatives could actually team up, that they have some things in common. And it strikes me like this is like a bootleggers and Baptist type of thing, where you could argue that social conservatives who don't like drinking could ally potentially with people who are very concerned about sexual assault. Right. I think that's would be very, very beneficial. I think there's a lot of things that I think need to be done that probably don't have the same amount of potential on the right. There's a push for consent education in high school. I think that would be enormously helpful, and I want as many schools as possible to do things like that. I want our kids taught properly how to engage in sexual behavior. I imagine, I'm just being knee-jerk here, that's not going to be implemented in a lot of social conservative areas based on how other sex education is treated in socially conservative areas. We have a lot of data supporting sex education that promotes contraceptive use, and yet there are many states that legally mandate abstinence education, which is proven not effective because it fits the local customs and mores of those areas. So if you have those areas saying, I don't want my kids being taught how to have sex in school, there's no way I'm going to support consent education. That's going to limit how effective that is because it's not going to be adopted places. So I'm not saying don't do that. You should push for consent education as much as possible. You can do that alongside of promoting reduced alcohol use in high schools and colleges, and you might get partners with social conservatives in doing that, and so those things can work in tandem.
No, I mean, I think it's a fascinating idea, and just point to make. And I know you're not calling for prohibition, but look, if you're looking at just sort of an outcome-based thing, if your goal is like, how can we mitigate, or how can we realistically make these things less likely to happen and less frequent, then cutting down on drinking, I do suspect, would actually do that.
There's even some recent example here. Mothers Against Drunk Driving. From its formation in 1980, it took them 4 years to get a bill passed in Congress that essentially prompted almost every state to raise the drinking age to 21, because they had a bill saying if you don't raise your age to 21, you're not going to get federal highway funds. And in 1980, I believe it was 83.
Remember, Brett Kavanaugh was part of that story, actually.
Oh, is that right?
Because you were able to drink in Maryland at the age of 18, and then I think they changed the law right around the time he was at that age. In fact, there's some theory that the alleged incident happened, and don't quote me on this being accurate, but I've heard that it happened at a party that was like the last night before the law went into effect, something about that.
So, at first Reagan said, I don't think that the federal government should be getting in the business of deciding, using highway funds to determine what states do. That violates conservative notions of states' rights. So after Mothers Against Drunk Driving, they had leaders who were not previously in politics. One of the leaders, her child was killed. Another leader, her child was seriously injured. They came together. They built a grassroots network nationwide. They had a made-for-TV movie that got a lot of attention. I believe it was Emmy nominated. And with all that build-up, Reagan flips and says, "Okay, we need to do this." Then there were people. It passed by a large margin, but there were conservatives grumbling. One even called it little prohibition. But the power of the argument was such that it transcended ideological and party lines. So I think holding college campuses accountable for drinking, I don't think there is a immediate broad support for that kind of thing, but there's potential to get people on the left and right together to try to build this.
And I would also say, and Mike, I have a first cousin who was killed. Her name is Samantha, valedictorian, just graduated high school when she was killed 15 years ago by a drunk driver, a young guy who sat at a bar and was just overserved. I don't know how many drinks he had before he killed her. So it's a big issue, and obviously one that is horrible. I do think that it's not the law raising the drinking age. I'm sure that has had an effect, but also just the technology, Uber, Lyft, and just the culture. Remember, did you ever not wear seatbelts? Nobody used to wear seatbelts.
Well, not in the back seat as a kid.
Certainly not in the back seat, but even in the sometimes those things become law, or it's just habits. I mean, smoking, the laws on smoking, which you could talk about the nanny state, but smoking is horrible. It's horrible for you. It's a scourge, and the government incrementally, crept in and basically shut it down. And now, if you're a smoker, you're basically like a refugee out, standing out front.
But I think it's more than just. There's government policy in there. It's true, but there's also a cultural shift that did not come naturally. There was tobacco settlement money. They got funneled into what was called the Truth Campaign, and they had an extremely aggressive ad campaign targeted at young people, and it was much more well executed than this is your brain on drugs, which everyone laughed at. The Truth Campaign had really sharp, edgy ads that pinned the tobacco companies as corporate monsters trying to manipulate you, and that stuff worked. And you had a pressure campaign in Hollywood to say, stop making smoking look cool in all your movies and TV shows. And now that happens much, much less than it used to. So you could have the same sort of cultural pressure campaign. I mean, how many movies is binge drinking a plot point? I mean, you have an entire series called The Hangover.
Thanks, Bradley Cooper.
So I think you could certainly say, look, Hollywood, you have been a major problem in the world of sexual assault for a long, long time. Here's something you could do to make amends and stop encouraging binge drinking amongst young people.
Now, let me just say, for $50 Patreon supporters, I will send you a Matt Lewis and the Brews mug. And I'm not joking. Supplies are limited for that. But otherwise, I agree with everything Bill said. Let me ask you this question, Bill Scher, on a slightly less serious note. Have you seen the Family Ties episode where Alex P. Keaton drives from Ohio to Wheeling, West Virginia, because the drinking age is only 18 in West Virginia?
I'm sure I have. I can't say I remember it right now.
He goes there. It's him and Skippy and somebody else. I forget who. And they meet these, I guess, college girls. And Alex pretends that he's a pilot. And he's hitting on them, talking about he's going to bomb Canada in the morning. And then Elise Keaton, Alex's mom, finds out. She follows him all the way down and confronts him at the bar. That's not a good scene on your 18th birthday.
It's coming back to me now.
Yeah. I've seen them all. Right up here.
I mean, I mentioned this previously, but I started showing Family Ties to my oldest.
Oh, yeah.
And
we talked about Matt. I made some unwise comments about Justine Bateman.
Yeah, but I only get to watch the first 10 on CBS.com, and they're almost all really heavy. They do not waste any time getting into the very special episodes.
I bet you it got dumber over time. I actually feel like Stephen Keaton was on a similar path to Homer Simpson, where like Stephen Keaton gets dumber. Like he starts off he's clean shaven the first episode, and he's sort of a liberal activist, and I think he's a serious character. And by the end, Steve Keaton is basically like a cartoon character, like a bumbling, father, like Hollywood sort of like really. I mean, am I wrong about that? Do you feel like
I haven't watched the later episodes lately, so I would need to reassess. I will say, I think it's the very first episode. I think one of the best lines on TV, period, where Stephen Keaton's talking to Alex Keaton about the girl he liked when he was a kid and how she
volunteered for Nixon, right? Or Goldwater or something.
And he said, she was a real fascist, but she wore it well.
That's right, and that's because Alex was dating a liberal girl.
Well, no, a country club. It was a country club. She was in a country club that was exclusive and racist.
Different one, right? Okay, yeah. I've seen that one too. Oh, they're all so good.
Anyway, I know you got to run.
Well, I mean, I was in a hurry, but if you wanted to talk about Family Ties, I can make time.
I think we're good.
The audience demands more.
I do want to plug. The New Books and Politics podcast coming back in force. Just up today is my interview with Michael Kontsowitz. It's his first book, but it's called They Said No to Nixon. He digs up these stories of Republicans inside the Nixon White House that thwarted Nixon when he was abusing presidential power, and it goes well beyond Watergate. So it's stuff that you might not be intimately familiar with. And obviously has parallels to today. Will Republicans stand up to Trump? How many inside the administration are standing up to Trump? People like Rod Rosenstein, for example.
Right.
So, really good book, really good interview, if I may say. And I got a couple more coming out next week. I don't want to. I will tell them. Why not? Because they're in the can. Your good friend David Petrusha.
Oh, yes.
And I had a great talk about his new book, TR's Last War. And MSNBC Steve Kornacki and I had a fantastic conversation about his new book, The Red and the Blue, about tribal politics, the 1990s, and Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich. So those two should be out next week.
I like both of those guys. They're both Mensches. David Petrusha, a great guy. Did you get into the theory he posits that TR may have taken his own life at the end with the morphine?
Yes, we do talk about that, and it's something that has gotten his book banned from the National Park Service Teddy Roosevelt birthplace site. They will not sell that book in the bookstore, even though it's totally. Patricia doesn't even say he does not assert as fact.
Right.
He speculates, and if it is true, so what? I thought we were past suicide being a secret shame that we don't talk about.
Right.
It's so very, very weird reaction on the part of Teddy Roosevelt's birthplace site, but. Great conversation about Teddy Roosevelt's last year as a part of his life that does not get talked about very much, and I think it was a really good conversation.
Awesome, man. Well, check those out. How do people find, if they wanted to find it right now on their iPhone, how would they do that? How do you find it?
Well, I have the link to the iTunes site on my Twitter page right now, so if you look at my plug for the most recent podcast, I have a link to the
just go
iTunes
to
page.
Twitter.com/Bill Scher.
And it is also available at the newbooksnetwork.com. That's where that podcast is hosted.
Because my concern with the new books is there are other people other than you. I want just Bill Scher, I want a feed that's just Bill Scher interviewing.
Well, there is an iTunes link that is just new books in politics.
Although
sometimes some of the other hosts do things that bleed into politics, so they get double tagged and they get into my feed. But all my stuff's in that one channel.
Let's work on that not happening. I only want Bill Scher.
I appreciate that. What do you got going on, Matt?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I had hernia surgery on Thursday. So you
didn't live tweet that? You didn't Facebook Live it?
I thought about tweeting a picture of the 4 scars that it's left, the open wounds that were left. I felt better of that, but they gave me some pretty heavy oxycodone medicine, and then my wife and I went to see. So that was Thursday. Saturday night I left the house, I guess for the first time, to go out, and we went to see that. Speaking of Bradley Cooper and The Hangover, his new movie. A Star is Born with Lady Gaga, which is not a great movie. It has some great performances, but not a great movie. It's got some major, it's in need of some major edits. But one of the themes is that Bradley Cooper's character is this raging alcoholic and drug abuser, and frequently he pulls out bottles that looked exactly like the one that I had in my pocket at that moment. And well, sometimes he snorts them, sometimes he takes them. It depends on the moment. But literally after seeing that movie, I did not take another. There's a couple pills left over that I did not take because I'm like, we're switching to Advil, saying this is not happening. So anyway, that's why I don't have anything to talk about. I got nothing. I haven't taped the pod. I'm delinquent on my podcast.
So I'm stepping in at the right time.
You were hopefully this is spurring thoughts and ideas, and I can go steal your ideas and write about them.
This is like Hugh Grant going on Jay Leno's show and robbing David Letterman's audience. This is my moment.
I think my piece is going to be the case for prohibition. Right now. I'm going to write that right now.
All right.
All right, buddy. See you guys. Thanks.